Alright, welcome back to Mod 1 Lesson 7, and today we're going to continue with our place values, and we're going to be using a lot of the unit form in order to make our understanding of it a lot easier. Now, for today we're going to be decomposing and rounding decimals. When I say decomposing, that means we're going to be breaking them up into unit form, because that really helps us do these different things, such as comparing them. That made it pretty easy. And now we're going to round them using unit form also. So let's get started. All right, our standard is actually MBT 14, and it's in red because I'm not expecting you to have to write this down in your notes. I'll have it up on the board. But we're going to use place value understanding to round decimals to any place. Now, our lesson objective, I do expect you to write this down, is to round a given decimal to any place using place value understanding and the vertical number line. And I'll show you what the vertical number line is shortly. Our essential question, how can I use my place value understanding to round decimals to any place? Okay, so let's go ahead and decompose this number right here. Get my pen. And it says 155, so I could write that in normally where a 1 100, 5 tens, and 5 ones. So that is the normal place value for a standard form. Now, I could also call this 15 tens and 5 ones. And the last one I could possibly do would be 155 ones. So there's 3 different ways I broke it down there, and it just depends on what we're going to do with it and which one would be best for us to use. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look. Now here's the 3 we have. Now let's say I was rounding to the nearest tens. Okay? Well, if I was rounding to the nearest tens, then the best selection for me would be to do the one that rounded them to tens right here. Okay? So, I'm going to look at this, and it says I have 15 tens. So my 15 tens, I'm going to change color so we can see it better, but the 15 tens would go on bottom. Now the question when you're rounding to the nearest tens is it at 15 tens or one more, which would be 16 tens. Now that we have 15 tens on bottom, 16 tens on top, we need to find out what the midpoint is. And this would be 15 tens and 5 ones. Because right in between 15 and 16, or let's just say in between 0 and 10 is 5. So midpoint is always going to be 5. So 15 tens, same as the bottom, and 5 extra ones. Now I'm going to take a look at the number I have, which is 15 tens, 5 ones. And I'm going to put my dot right on the place value chart where it's at, which is right there in the red dot. So I have 15 tens, 5 ones. Now the rule for rounding says that if it is on or above the midpoint, we round up. If it is below the midpoint, we round down. So this would round down to 15 tens, 5 ones. Or as we can see here, 155. Okay, so our next one, we want to take a look at rounding to the nearest hundreds. So I'm looking here at the hundreds place. Okay, that's the unit form I'm going to use. Now I'm coming up, and it says round to the nearest hundreds. So I know there's 100 here. Now, the top one always goes one more than the bottom, so this is going to be 200s because we're rounding to the closest 100. Now, right in the center, we know the midpoint is going to be 100 and 5, because 5 is always in the middle, and you can see right next to the hundreds is 10, so 100, 5 tens would be the midpoint. Now, I'm coming down, I'm looking at our number. I have 5 tens, 100s, 5 tens, so that's going to be right here. Okay, and since it's on the midpoint or above, we would round to 200. Okay, first thing we're going to do here is we're going to decompose the decimal. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in a standard form with 1, 5, and 7. Now I'm going to write it in unit form to the tenths, which would be 15 tenths, 7 hundredths. Or I could say I have 150 700ths. And once again, it depends on what we're going to be rounding to, or which one is going to work best for us. Now in this case, the 15 tenths, because we're rounding to the tenths. So once again, we're going to start at the bottom, which is 15 tenths. Now our next one above is going to be one more tenth in that, so that's going to be 16 tenths. And right in the center is going to be 15 tenths and 5, because it's always a 5, next place value, hundredths. Now I'm taking my dot, and I'm seeing, since we're rounding to the tenths, I can look to the next one, and this is 15 tenths 7 hundredths. So 15 7 hundredths would be approximately right here. Okay, and it's above that midpoint, so we would be rounding up again. So we'd be rounding to 16 tenths or 160. Now let's decompose 4 and 381 thousandths. Once again, the first one, we're just going to write it out in standard form. Then we're going to start combining ones. So the ones in the tenths would combine to be 43 tenths, 8, and 1. Or I could say 438 hundredths, 1 thousandths, or it could actually say 4,381 thousandths. Now, as you can see, they did the same thing here, and we're looking for the closest tens. So we're going to the tens right here, and we can see that we actually have 0 tens. So that's what would actually go in down here. 0 tens. And then the one higher than that would be 1 tens. And in the center is our midpoint, where we'd go 0 tens. And we can see the one next to it would be 5 ones. So 0 tens, 5 ones would be our midpoint. Now, we're looking at our actual number, and since we're going to the tens, we look at the next one, it says 4 ones. So 0 and 4 would be about here. And since it's below the midpoint this time, anything below the midpoint rounds down. So we would actually round to 0 tens or 0. Okay? That one is a little tricky sometimes to students. Alright, so the next one, we're decomposing 9 and 975 thousandths. And then we're going to decompose it further. We could say 99 tenths, 7 hundredths, 5 thousandths. Or I could say 997 thousandths, hundredths, and 5 thousandths. Or the final one, I could go 9,975 thousandths. Now we're rounding to the nearest ones. So this is where we're rounding to. So we're going to start off by saying we got 9 ones. One more ones would be 10 ones. Right in the center would be 9 ones, and the next one is hundreds, but it'd be 5 hundredths. And we see our number here has, I messed that up. Okay, so this time we're going to be rounding to the nearest tenths. So we're looking at right here. This is what we're going to be working with. So on here we're going to put 99 tenths. And one more tenths would be 100 tenths. Right in the center is going to be 99 tenths. And we know midpoint is always a 5. And the next place value is hundredths. Now, if we look at what our actual number is, we got 99 tenths 7 hundredths, which would be slightly above midpoint. And that means we'll be rounding up to 100 tenths. And as you can see, 100 tenths, I'm going to write it down here, 100 tenths would actually be equal to 10. Now let's take this one and we're going to go to the hundredths position this time. We're going to round to the hundredths. So we're looking at the hundredths column and we can see we got 997 hundredths. So 997 hundredths. One more up would be 998 hundredths. Right in the center would be 997 hundredths. And always a 5 for midpoint. And the next place value would be thousandths, so 5 thousandths. Now we're looking here and we can see we have 997 5 thousandths. So it would actually be right on the midpoint. And on or above the midpoint, we round up. So we're going to round to 998 hundredths. So 998 hundredths would be 998 hundredths, which would be 9 and 98 hundredths. All right. Well, I hope using the uniform and the vertical number line helps you with rounding. It makes it a lot simpler if you can master this skill. Okay? All right. Have a good day.